welcome everyone to the latest webinar in our Engineerica Education Keynote Series. We are very pleased to be bringing you this complimentary presentation. We are very happy to see you here today. For those of you new to us, Engineerica specializes in academic center management systems for higher education. So you might be familiar with our software applications such as AccuTrack, Academia, and AccuCampus. We started the keynote series for our clients and contacts who want to learn more about best practices and trends in higher education. So each month we feature a distinguished speaker to talk about hot topics in the academic support field. So we will be pausing the webinar series in January. So we're just going to skip January. We know that many of you will be recovering from winter break and getting ready for the spring term, but we do have speakers lined up for the next few months. So be on the lookout for further information about that in your email and on our website and social media as well. So just a quick introduction to myself. I'm Rachel Cook. I'm a client success manager with Engineerica. I was previously a learning center manager in higher ed for 6 years. So like all of you, I'm very passionate about higher education and student success. I also have with me Jorge Rodriguez, one of our technical support specialists, who's here as my backup and also here to help with any technical issues that come up on our end, the speaker's end, or yours. Say hi, Jorge.
Hello.
Hi. So you may be hearing from either of us in the chat if you have any issues come up. I am pleased, with that said, I am pleased to introduce you to this month's speaker. Dr. Saundra McGuire is the Director Emerita of the Center for Academic Success and the retired Assistant Vice Chancellor and Professor Emerita of Chemistry at Louisiana State University. She is an elected fellow of the Council of Learning Assistance and Developmental Education Associations and has achieved Level 4 Lifetime Learning Center Leadership Certification through the National College Learning Center Association, or NCLCA. Additionally, she received the Commitment to Excellence in Academic Support Award from the Commission of Academic Support in Higher Education. Dr. McGuire has delivered keynote addresses or presented workshops at over 500 institutions in 47 states and 13 countries. She is the author of Teach Students How to Learn, Strategies You Can Incorporate into Any Course to Improve Student Metacognition, Study Skills, and Motivation, as well as the student version, Teach Yourself How to Learn, Strategies You Can Use to Ace Any Course at Any Level. I do want to let you know we will be sending you the slides from today's presentation as well as some additional resources shortly after the conclusion of today's webinar, so keep an eye out for that in your inbox. We'll also send, as I mentioned, the recording to all registrants soon. So with that, Saundra, I am going to make you the presenter.
Okay.
And take it away.
Great. I will show my screen and get the PowerPoint up. Let's see, and let me just add my thanks to everyone for coming. I know this is a really busy time. Now, okay, now you see me again, right? This is the first time I've used this platform.
Yep. We can see you and we can see your screen.
Oh, okay, yeah, but you don't see the PowerPoint.
Yeah, we see your PowerPoint.
You okay, yeah. So now you still see the PowerPoint, you see me. Okay, great, yes. And I just want to thank Engineerica and especially Rachel and Jorge for helping me with this. This is the first time I will have ever used this platform, GoToWebinar. And so I was also a little bit surprised to find that the participants would not be able to see the communications with each other, but it's going to be fine. We will make sure that everybody knows what's being entered. And this is my, now do you still see the PowerPoint again?
Yeah.
Okay, because it keeps disappearing from my screen and I keep seeing me again. So, okay, great. All right, well, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I decided to talk about metacognition, the key to achieving educational equity and excellence, because it seems to me I'm seeing more and more evidence that the big problem with students who are not achieving well in college, it's not that they don't have the ability to do so, but they just haven't learned the strategies that the successful students are using. Now, let me just say, I ask a lot of questions, and I'm going to ask you to use the question area to put your responses in. But it's also true that if you have any questions as we go along, then you can put those in the chat box. And I'm going to try to get to as many as I can. But I'll give you my email address, so if there are any questions, later on, then you can ask. And I'm going to ask Rachel and Jorge to please monitor that. And so if you see any questions that I missed, then just let me know what has come up. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to know, you know a little bit about me, and so I want to know how familiar you are with our work. And so this is the first poll. We have a few polls interspersed throughout, and so please indicate if you've attended a workshop. I've done tons and tons of workshops, and I've done lots of webinars, or if you've been to both. And if you haven't done that, if you've read Teach Students How to Learn, or if you've done none of the above. Okay, and so I'm seeing these. Okay,
Yep.
some two.
I went ahead and I launched the poll. So if people want to answer that way, that would be a little easier for us if you could do that.
Oh yeah, instead of putting it.
Yeah, I see people coming in there. Okay, we're getting a lot of responses very quickly.
Oh, wonderful.
All right,
wonderful.
we have 70%. So I'm going to give it about 5 more seconds. Is that all right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, all right, so we'll go ahead and close that poll. Actually, I'm still getting people responding like pretty.
Oh, okay. Well, you can give them another 5 seconds.
Okay.
If you want to. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
So
Yep.
Yeah, just about 60%. Oh, you can go ahead and tell the results.
Most people responded, so I will go ahead and share those results. So 59%, and this was multiple answers allowed, 59% said they have not done any workshops.
No, but Rachel, they can see the results, correct?
They should be able to, yes.
Okay, yeah, so we won't read those out then.
Okay.
If anybody can't see them, if you just put in the question box and let us know you can't see them, then we'll make sure we read them out. But with the polls going forward, we won't read them out. We're assuming that everybody can see them, and then I'll just comment on the results, but we won't read everything out. So I see that about 60% of us have not done either, so this is good information to know. So then the next poll question is, how much you know about metacognition? Because I know a lot of people have been talking about metacognition for decades, and you would not have had to see anything that I've done to know about it. So if you can let me know how much you know about metacognition, that would be great.
All right, so we've had that poll launched. We've got a lot of responses so far.
Yeah, I see them coming in. So now about 83%, either a little bit or quite a lot. 20%, almost nothing. Okay.
Okay. All right. I'll give it a few more seconds before I close it.
Okay, that sounds good. Oh wow, yeah, because we're at 80. These are fast voters. Normally,
I like it.
Normally when I'm doing faculty workshops, it takes about 20 seconds to get 60% of.
Yeah. All right.
Okay,
shall we go?
So, yeah, we're at about 88%, so we can close it in 5 seconds.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you closed it already. That's fine.
I'm sorry, I clicked it too soon. All right. And we'll go ahead and share that so everyone can see the responses.
Yeah. Okay, so about a third of us, quite a lot, and only about 15-16%, almost nothing. Okay, and so, but for those of you who know almost nothing, not to worry, because I'm going to talk about how I discuss it with students. And so you will not have missed anything if you know nothing about metacognition. And actually in this question, I'm always interested to see if anybody's going to click D, and I'm relieved to see that nobody clicked D in this case. Okay, and so we're going to go ahead. So the agenda, we're going to talk about metacognition and metacognitive equity. And then we're going to talk about the impact of teaching metacognitive strategies to individuals, to classes, and to whole institutions, because that works well also. And then we'll talk about Bloom's taxonomy and the study cycle, which is a tool that students find very helpful. And then I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the role of mindset in student learning. And then toward the end, as we're about to wrap up, I'll talk about how we can make our learning centers more inclusive environments for our students. And then we will conclude and have a wrap up. And so the concepts that we're going to be talking about today are pulled from the book Teach Students How to Learn, and also the student book that we published 3 years after that in 2018, Teach Yourself How to Learn, because there were so many students who were using the faculty book that and were saying that it was helpful, that we decided to write 1, 2, and 4 students instead of one that was 2 faculty about students. And most recently, and this should be coming out in January or February, we're doing one for parents. And it's going to be the Parents Guide to Studying and Learning, because there was a publisher who read the other 2 and said parents need to have this information. And so they are going to come out with that. Okay, now let me make sure, because I want to be able, okay, so I can still see the questions. Let me just move them over a little bit. Okay, now let me undock it and then move it back over, because I do want to see your comments. It docked itself again. Okay, so let me move it over. Okay, and okay, I think it's where I need it to be. And yeah, so those are the books. Now, I say that, and I'm just not me. I mean, the idea is that if we want to have equal participation among different groups, then we really do have to remove any of those obstacles. And it's not about equality. It's not about making sure that everybody has exactly the same resources. And you see exactly why. The students who are already able to succeed with no interventions, I mean, you know, they're going to be even further ahead. But this little guy here with the same support that these 2 have, then this person still doesn't see. So we've got to remove the obstacles to academic success. And I say that that requires, it's a term that I coined, now I first started using it about 1.5 years. I call it metacognitive equity. And metacognitive equity deals with the fact, well, it's related to equity. And educational equity involves reducing the discrepancy in educational outcomes between low-income versus high-income students, minoritized versus majority students, etc. That closing the gap that we talk about. And metacognitive equity, I say, is reducing the discrepancy in metacognition, or the thinking strategies between different groups of students. And especially students who come from, I'll say, well-resourced high schools versus students who come from lesser resourced high schools. The students who've taken a lot of AP courses, IB courses, they've had exposure to the kind of thinking that's required at the university level, at the college level, but other students have not. And again, I find that the discrepancy in performance is not related to any lack of ability, but the lack of the development of these metacognitive skills. And so metacognition, for those, most of us are familiar with, for those of us who aren't, is just a term that was coined by cognitive psychologist Flavel back in 1976. And simply put, it's your ability to think about your own thinking. And I know there are a lot more sophisticated definitions. There are all different kinds of parts of types of metacognition. But when I'm talking to students, I like to make it as simple as possible so that they intuitively understand what this concept is. And so for students, I just define it as thinking about your own thinking. And I tell them it's as if you have a big brain outside your brain looking at what your brain is doing. And that big brain is asking your brain questions, and it's saying, does she understand this information, or did she just memorize it last night because the test is today? It is your ability to be consciously aware that you are a problem solver. When things come up that you don't know, or something that you haven't figured out, you don't have to have somebody else to explain these things to you. You can see if do I have resources that would allow me to answer this question. And I think a good example of that is if we think about it, and here's a question that I want you to put the answer in the question box, and this will be my first test to see if I can see these in real time as they come in. So the question is, most of the questions that students have about the courses that they're in, where could they find that information? For example, if they say, well, you know, I don't know when the next test is going to be. I wonder what's going to be on the next test. Okay, yes, I can see them coming in. Fantastic. Okay, yes, the syllabus. Okay, and so if a student is not using their metacognitive brain, then they'll say, oh, I wonder when the next test is. Let me go ask the teacher. And learning management system, absolutely. Syllabus schedule, they have all kinds of resources they can use. But if they're not using their metacognitive brain, then they'll say, oh, I wonder when the next test is. Let me go ask the teacher. And the metacognitive brain says, no, we don't have to ask the teacher. We can figure that out. And then the brain says, well, what am I supposed to do? And the metacognitive brain says, well, what resources did our instructor give us that might have that information on it? And so it leads them to the syllabus. And so it makes students aware that when they have questions, they can take steps to answer those questions. It's their ability to plan, monitor, and evaluate and control their mental processing so they know if they're understanding material, if they're just memorizing it. It's their ability to accurately judge their level of learning. And I'm going to ask you, this is a yes or no question for the chat box. Have you ever seen students where they haven't done well on a test or a quiz, and they come in complaining and they say, but I studied for hours and hours for that test. I don't know why I failed it. Okay, yes, all the time. Okay, now, typically those students are not lying. They did spend hours and hours studying for this test, but here's a question for you to answer the question area. What were those students doing? Okay, yeah, there's no A for hard work. Okay, yeah. And so the question is, what were those students doing? Yeah, and I'm seeing Jelena, I think, says memorizing. Exactly. I was going to say, what activities were they involved in? Memorizing, reading over and over. Absolutely. Yeah, studying at levels 1 and 2 for tests. Okay, and you're getting to where I'm going. Not spending time on things they didn't understand. Perfect, yes. And so they did spend hours and hours, but they were memorizing, going over those notes, rereading, highlighting. And so if you were, for example, a psychology test, and we ask the question, define positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, and punishment. They're good to go because they have memorized those definitions. But those aren't the kind of questions that we ask. The kind of questions that they may be faced with on a test is they may be given a scenario. And the question is, for this particular scenario, would positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, or punishment work best to change the behavior? Defend your choice. Well, they're just not ready for that because they've studied at the memorization level. And so here's a yes or no for the chat box. And I know most of us are learning center folks, and so you may not be teaching a class, but yes or no, have you introduced Bloom's taxonomy to your students, the students who come to the center? Or, okay, and if the answer is no, that's fine. Okay, so I'm seeing lots of yeses, I'm seeing some no's. Okay, a few times yes, okay, and no. When I do these for faculty, I get a lot more no's than yeses, even though, okay, a few times to my student tutors, yes. And okay, and this is great, Virginia, where tutors are trained how to ask various levels of questions, and that's absolutely fantastic. When I talk with tutors, I actually talk about having the tutors share Bloom's taxonomy with the students. And so I actually recommend for us as Learning Center folks to have a big chart of Bloom's taxonomy in our center, because Bloom's taxonomy is so important, and I'll show you as we get through how students use that information and how how detrimental it is for them if they haven't seen that. Okay, other people who work here, who work with study skills with students actually do. Yeah, and I find that most faculty don't, even though they know Bloom's, because they've got to write those student learning outcomes that are tied to Bloom's. Typically, they don't teach it to their students, but I urge all of us to teach Bloom's to our students. And here's another thing. I hadn't planned to talk about this, but it just dawned on me. I don't know if you, from your learning center, are actually offering faculty development workshops at your institution. If you're partnering with the faculty development folks to offer workshops for faculty. We did that at LSU, and it was wildly successful because faculty really are interested in knowing what are the challenges that students are facing. You can share the strategies that we in the Learning Center community teach students in order for them to improve. And faculty love hearing about this. And this is where I ask them about Bloom's and suggest that they share it. Because students need to be able to accurately judge the level of learning that they are working at. And when I talk with students, I will often ask the students, how many of you have ever heard a faculty member say something like, this is college now, you got to kick it up a notch. This is not high school anymore. All the hands go up. And then when I ask those students, how many of you think you can tell me exactly what those professors are talking about when they say, this is college, we operate at higher levels, you got to kick it up a notch? Very few hands go up, but the ones that do, they'll say things like, they mean that college is going to be harder than high school. Or they might say, they're going to give us a lot more work in college than we had in high school. Sometimes they'll say, we have to take more responsibility for our work than we did in high school. And I said, yeah, all of those things are true, but they're also talking about something else. It's called Bloom's taxonomy. How many of you have ever heard of Bloom's taxonomy? And almost no students have heard of Bloom's taxonomy. And so I think that Bloom's taxonomy is the lens through which our students have to hear that statement that you're in college now, you got to kick it up a notch, because if they don't even know that there are any levels that exist, then they're in the dark about how to go to higher levels. And so I'm going to urge all of us to make sure that we teach Bloom's to our students. It's your ability to know what you don't know. So you don't show up at a test or a quiz thinking, okay, I'm good, I know this stuff, I studied all night, and then you look at the first 2 or 3 questions and realize, uh-oh, I guess I don't know this after all. And so once you're able to do all of these things, then students are in a much better position to operate and to take control of their own learning, to direct their own, so self-directed learning. Well, when I started looking at this, I'm thinking, why haven't a lot of students already developed these strategies? Well, it typically wasn't necessary. These are data from the UCLA Higher Education Research Institute. They do a survey every year of first-year students, all different kinds of institutions, 2-year, 4-year, etc. And I was looking at data going back to 2010, and 2019 was still the last year for which I could find the data available. And when I looked at this, it gave me information about why students act the way they do. What we see is that, I mean, these folks ask a lot of questions, but I'm particularly interested in the answers to 2. One is how much time they spent doing any homework in 12th grade, and the average that they had when they graduated. And what you'll notice is that this started out in the high 30s, it reached a high of about 45 in 2015, and now it's in the low 40s. But if you see what their average was when they graduated from high school, this number crossed 50% in 2013, and it was almost 60% in 2019. And anecdotally, I've heard that for 2020 and 2021, it was actually even higher than that because of COVID. And so many teachers had to relax a lot of their standards because a lot of their students just didn't have access to the kinds of things they needed. So these students are coming to us having done very little work, but they have all A's. And so when I saw that, it dawned on me that our students really are just being good scientists. What scientists do is take the data and come up with actions based on what the data presents to them. Well, this is what our students are doing. Their data suggests to them that I can make A's, not do any work outside of class, and I'm good to go. And so when they come to us, they have no idea that that's going to be any different. And so here's questions for you to put in the chat box. When I talked with students, and I've asked this question to students all over the country, other countries also, but I want you to put in the chat box what you think the answer was when I asked students, what did most of your teachers in high school do the day before the test, the class period before the test? Okay, review, I'm seeing review. Oh, but I used to almost on the test. Okay, review. Now, I expected review or review session, which most of you are saying. Are answering questions? Absolutely. But the first response that we got actually was what students said. They said that they got the test questions and they went over the questions that were going to be on the test. Now, I expected them to say review. And so I was shocked when they said that they got the test questions and went over them. And I can tell you this just happened to me 2 days ago. There was a student at LSU who I was working with who really needed to spend a lot of time on his math course. And so I asked him, well, do you have any other finals? Because I wanted to make sure he could spend as much time as he needed on math. without neglecting the other courses. And so he actually told me, he said, well, yeah, there's one course, I won't tell you the course, but he said, in that particular course, I don't have to spend any time studying for that final because he gave us the final exam questions and we went over the answers. And I said, really? And so I said, well, why did he do that? And he said, well, the midterm was really hard and people tanked the midterm. And I think he felt bad. And so he decided that he was going to make the final much easier. So that was and I see Rebecca gasps. Yeah, I never heard of that in college. I knew it happened in high school, but not heard of it in college. And so it's possible that some of our students will have experienced this even in college. So when they said they, gave us the test questions and went over the answers, I was shocked. And so I said, okay, well, since that's what they did, I asked the students, oh, well, what did they do during this activity? They went over the test questions. And I said, okay, well, if you had never gone to class a single day, except just the day before the test, and you went to class that day and you paid really close attention, what's the lowest grade you would have made on the test the next day? And put in the question box, what do you think the lowest grade students said that they would have made if they had not gone to any class except just the one before? Okay, I'm seeing an A. Okay, same 75B, A, 65C. Okay, so very few of them said A. A few of them said A, but very few. Very few of them said C. Most of them said B. And so then that helped me understand why students were perfectly happy not to do anything at all. Nobody said 50. Nope, nobody even said D. The lowest one I got was C, and most of them said B, and there were a few people who said A. But that helped me understand why students didn't do anything in the first part of their classes, because they just figured that the review sheet is coming, the review session is coming, I'm going to get the answers, and I will look and I'll memorize the information on the review sheet, or I'll pay close attention to the review session. And so what that said to me is that we have to help students close this gap. Now, I think that this situation is worse for students from some schools than others. And this is where what I call this metacognitive equity gap comes in. And these are some of the studies that speak to this. But children from low-income families enter high school with average literacy skills 5 years behind those of high-income students. Economically disadvantaged students have less access to mentors who are going to model the metacognitive thinking that they'll need. Students from less resource schools are more likely to be less academically challenged. They're much less likely to have taken any AP courses, any IB courses. And also, they are more likely to have a fixed mindset about intelligence. And so we're going to talk about exactly what that means. And so there also is an impact of privilege on metacognitive development. This is kind of what we're saying, because some entering freshmen have experiences and well-developed metacognitive strategies and skills that many more students don't have. But this particular report, this came out in 2019, said that institutions can or may be able to remedy some of those disadvantages during college by focusing on developing metacognitive skills. And but to do this, then schools might have to consider, and instructors may have to consider, reducing some of the content covering in those introductory courses, and instead really focus on metacognitive skills and awareness. And I really think that this is where, as learning centers, we can really help our institutions, because we know that the students need information in this area. Faculty don't know this information. They don't know how to teach it. And so that's where I think we can partner. At LSU, we had a program we call the Absent Professor Program, where we let faculty know that if you've got to be out of town, you got to go to a meeting, or if you have a family emergency or something that comes up, if you can let us know at least one class period in advance, you don't have to cancel class. We will come and we will do a session with your students on learning strategies. Oh, and this is the thing too, I keep saying learning strategies. You'll notice that I almost never say study skills. And that's by design. I find that very often if we talk about study skills, then students' eyes glaze over. But if we talk about metacognitive learning strategies, then that makes a big difference. That gets their interest. And so basically then what we're saying is that we as faculty and academic support staff, we have to help students identify this gap between their current behavior, which is leading to poor grades and not the learning outcomes we're looking for, and the productive behavior that's going to lead to the desired learning outcomes. And so I'm going to discuss these strategies with you by way of introducing you to specific students. Now, I do realize one thing, Rachel and Jorge, that we didn't go over. Okay, so I see a comment. It's a pretty long comment. Okay. Are there studies being done on how the pandemic may have negatively affected even the more privileged high school students in community college in terms of these study skills being developed? You know, I haven't seen any studies and I thought you were going to ask if there were studies looking at the increasing gap, because I have seen those. But what I have seen is that students from the more privileged high schools, the ones who would have had to work harder before, they don't have to work as hard because teachers are having to relax some of the standards because not everybody has access to the same level of technology. And so what I think is happening is that these students are negatively impacted because they will not have had the kind of rigor that they normally would have because of the pandemic. But I haven't seen any studies on that yet. Okay, and so I'm going to introduce you to very specific strategies that we can teach students that typically we don't teach students, and I'll show you what those strategies are so that at the end of this session you will have very specific strategies you can teach your tutors to teach students, or you can teach students with whom you work. And so the first one is Dana, and she was a first-year physics student, and I met Dana when she was about to drop out of the physics major after she had made a 54 on the second test. She was a straight A student. She was from Texas, and she always wanted to be a medical physicist since 10th grade. And she was alarmed by the 80. And then at 54, she was about to drop out of the physics major because she just thought she couldn't do it. And so I actually met her at a Change Your Major workshop. She was about to change. And I talked with her after the workshop. As she was leaving, I asked her if she had about an hour to spend talking with me in the office. She did just one session, and she made a 91. You see her grades here. She made an A in the course. And her problem was that she was memorizing formulas, which most students do, and then using online homework like Chegg for assistance. And then after we talked just 1 hour or so, then she started solving problems without using those external aids and started testing the mastery of her material. Okay, now Rachel and Jorge, this is the one thing that we did not practice, and that is I have Dana's video with sound. And so I know on Zoom, there's always something that I have to do that enables the sound to be heard by the participants, but I've never used GoToWebinar before. So is there anything special I need to do?
So Jorge can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we can't broadcast your computer's internal sound. But do you have like a microphone set up, or is it just playing out of a speaker?
I have a microphone set up, and so what I can do is I can play it, and you can tell me if you can hear it, and if you can't, yeah. So Rachel and Jorge, you can say yes or no, and our participants, you can put in the chat box yes or no if you can hear her. And I will turn this all the way up.
Okay.
And let's see. And she does start off softly though. Now she's talking. Can you hear her at all?
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. So what I'm going to do, since you can't hear her, I'm going to tell you what she's saying because, yeah. So, okay. Hi, my name is Dana Lewis Derby, and I'm a former student of Dr. McGuire's. And I just wanted to share a little bit of my story with you today. I met Dr. McGuire at a Find Your Majors workshop when I was a freshman. I knew that I wanted to major in physics in college, but I quickly found myself failing my introductory physics class. So I thought maybe I'm not cut out for this. And I went to a Change Your Major workshop. When I went there, afterwards, Dr. McGuire asked if she could talk to me and asked me if I would consider sticking with physics as a major a little bit longer and maybe trying some of the strategies that she was going to share with me. So instead of changing my major, I stayed and we started working together, and I started using her strategies about metacognition. I quickly learned that my method of trying to just work to try to pass assignments and tests wasn't working. I had to really learn the ability to problem solve, and I eventually had to relearn how to study. I was reading chapters differently and making notes and essentially doing homework assignments like they were tests or quizzes. And like I had to teach the information to someone else with the idea that if you can teach it, then you really know what you're talking about. After working with Dr. McGuire for a semester, I made an A in my physics course, and I went on to graduate to get my bachelor's in physics from LSU with honors. And I'll cut her off now. She said, all with Dr. McGuire's help. And she made it for students, and she was telling the students that she was very surprised that just going to one workshop would have made such a big difference in her life. And she is now a practicing medical physicist, and she's doing well. And so the strategy that I taught Dana, this is something that most of the students who we work with are not aware of this. Actually, I'll ask you to just put your answer in the question box. I want you to think back to the last time you were doing any homework at all. And if you ever did this, put yes. And if you didn't, put no. I can tell you my answer would be a yes in all capital letters with 5 exclamation points after. But did you ever find yourself, you would read a problem or read a question and then flip back in the chapter to find an example of the problem you had to work or a discussion of the question you had to answer? If you ever did that, put yes in the chat box. If you never, okay, I'm saying yes, you bet. Okay, yeah, all of our students are doing this. When I ask them, did they do that? They'll say, yeah. And I tell them, unfortunately, I did that too. And then I ask them, and I'll ask you, when we did that, were we working the problem? Was our brain working the problem or answering the question? Give me a yes or no. Absolutely. And students will say no. So my question is, if our brains were not working the question, working the problem or answering the question, what was working the problem or answering the question? And put that in the chat box for me, please. Exactly. Students will say the book, and they'll say the example, or answering the question. Absolutely. And so then I say, I know you're like me. I mean, I was a very, very capable student, and you are also. And I asked, how many of you remember thinking when you saw how the example was worked or the discussion of the question, thinking, oh yeah, I understand that. Oh yeah, I got that. And everybody says yes. And I said, yeah, but when we went to the test or quiz, if they changed anything at all around, what happened? And one student said, oops, I don't got that. And so that is why so many students do fine on homeworks. They're getting 90s, 100s on homeworks, thinking they're prepared for the test. And then they get there and they flunk the test because they haven't really used homework as a learning tool. They've used it as something to just get done and turn in for a grade. And so the strategy that we teach them instead is you have to study the material first before you look at the first problem. And when you do that, whether you're using the book or your notes, you're going to come across examples. And when you do that, just read the problem statement, nothing else, just the problem statement, and work it yourself. Work it until you get to an answer. And even if you get stuck at some point, then just power your way through until you get to an answer. Pretend it's a multiple choice question and you have to have an answer. And then when you get to an answer, then just compare your answer with the answer in the book. And if it's a question, just compare everything you've written with what the book says now, because you can look and see, did the book have anything you didn't include in your answer? Did you put anything that the book didn't have? Is it correct or not? But if it's a problem, I say, just look at the answer. If you got the same answer, then you can look at what the author did. If you didn't get the same answer, don't look yet. Try to figure out where your mistake was. And I ask students at this point in the process, do you think making a mistake is good or bad? And I want you to put in the question box, what do you think students tell me when I say at this point in the process, do you think that making a mistake is good or bad? Oh no, I was hoping my Learning Center colleagues wouldn't be like faculty, but we are. Okay, I see you say it's good, but they say bad. Yeah, that's interesting. No, students say good. Students always say good. Now, no, I think out of probably 500 of these, I've had 2 faculty groups that said students say good, but everybody else is saying exactly what you said. They say students say bad. Students always say good. Oh, and that's the other important part about this part of this process in helping students to change their behavior. It has to be done with, I think, with reflection questions, where they are thinking about their own experience and seeing how what we're suggesting to change is actually going to work. Before I learned about this, I would tell students what to do. You know, you need to do this, this, and that. And then I realized that that is not going to change students' behavior. They have to intuitively get it by relating this to their experiences. And so when they tell me good, I say absolutely. And I said, but now don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's bad if you don't make a mistake at this point, but why is it good if you make a mistake at this point? And they are so dead on. So put in the question box, why would it be good if you make a mistake at this point? Yeah, they do say good. And faculty are always surprised. And sometimes I'll do presentations for students. When I was traveling, I would do students the night before, and then faculty the next day. And there were faculty there saying, yeah, our students did say good. I saw them. Forces you to find the right answer. Okay, reevaluate strategies, catch it the next time and learn from it. Absolutely, yeah. And so the 3 common answers I get from students are, they say, I've seen, yeah, 2 of, actually I've seen all 3 of them in your responses, but they'll say you learn from your mistakes. That's the most common one. And then they'll say, well, now I know where my brain has a tendency to go wrong, and so I can look out for that. Sometimes they'll say you're not gonna make the same mistake twice. Productive struggle asks students to consider not just what they did incorrectly, but why they did that and how they can improve. That is great, Summer. I'm gonna come back to that in just a little bit. But yeah, and so, and the other thing they say is, well, it's not the test. And this, I will ask students at this point, how many of you, and I'll ask you to put a yes if you've ever heard this or no if you haven't, but I'll ask students, have you ever gotten a test or a quiz back and you looked at it and you said, I would have done so much better, but I just made simple mistakes. I made so many simple mistakes. Have you ever heard students say that? Yeah. And so I asked students, have you ever felt this? And they said all the time. And I said, yeah, I used to think the same thing. But my philosophy now, my attitude now is that there's no such thing as just simple mistakes. All mistakes look simple in retrospect. Once you know what the right thing is, your mistake looks so simple, but mistakes are things that have to be made. Now ask the students, if you don't make them at this point in the process, where are you going to make those mistakes? And put in the question box, where are you going to make them if you don't make them in this part of the process? On the test, yeah. And so students are telling me on the test. I'm not saying you better do this or you're going to screw up on the test. They're telling me on the test. And so when they give us the answers that we're trying to tell them, then they got it and they will act on it. In fact, just this morning, I read the results of a research. We had a master's degree student in chemistry who is thinking about going into education. And so she wanted to do a special topics project. And she interviewed students who had flunked the first test and did very well on the second test, because I always go and give this information to students after they've gotten the first test results back. Because if I do it before then, most of them will think they don't need it, so they're not paying attention. And so she interviewed a lot of students and asked, you know, what impact that that presentation made. And many of them started using homework differently. They started on the homework more than just the day before. And so when they see that they will make the mistake on the test, if they don't make it now, then they're much more motivated to do homework a different way. Okay, let this come up. Check to see if it's correct. If it's not, figure out where the mistake was. And that's just with the examples. When they get to the actual homework problems, I tell them, treat them as if it's a test or a quiz. Try to do 3 or 4, speed it up just a little bit, because many students run out of time on a test or a quiz, not because they don't know the information, but they're doing things so slowly because they don't want to make a mistake, because you have all the time that you need or you want to take if you're doing homework. And so when they do the homework as if they're in a test or a quiz and they practice speeding it up, doing the thing that they have to do when they get to the test or quiz, it makes a big difference. And so, so Dana now is a happy camper as a medical physicist. She is practicing in the state of Texas. In fact, she did her master's degree at the MD Anderson Cancer Center. And she wanted to be a medical physicist because her mom worked at that center, and she would go to work with her mom sometimes when she was in high school, and she talked with the medical physicists there, and that's what spurred her interest. And so that's where she got her master's, and she's practicing in Texas. Okay, so that's one strategy we can teach students. Now, the next one is a reading strategy. And this was a student who'd made a 47.52 on the first two tests, and then I talked with him the night before the third test, and he made an 82. And I was surprised because I thought, you know, talking to him the night before, I figured, you know, a 10, 20 point bump, that's all I was expecting, max 20 point. I figured he'd make mid to low 70s. Well, he made an 82, and he was so excited. He called me and said, Dr. McGuire made an 82 on that test. And see, that's the other thing about this information. When students use this information and see the increase, then they are motivated to continue using the strategies. And so when he said he made an 82, I said, that's fantastic, Travis. I said, if you make higher than Ann, and I was trying to give him a stretch score that I didn't think he would make higher than, but I said, if you make higher than an 85 on your next test, I will take you to lunch. So he calls me back about 3 weeks later, Dr. McGuire, I made an 86 on that test. And I said, okay, wow, Travis, that's great. Let me get back to you with the lunch date. So in the meantime, I contacted the professor to verify that this self-reported 86 was actually what he made. And she said, yeah, it was. And so I took him to lunch. Okay, so here is a comment. I'm faculty. What would you teach students who seem not to care? They don't communicate, and it's obvious to the professor that they lack self-esteem. Yeah, okay, and that's a great question. And what I have found, okay, so I would have an individual meeting with those students. What I found is that a lot of students who have this this demeanor of I don't care, or they have this attitude, I don't care, it's because they have been, and I'm going to use the word wounded for lack of a better term, in the educational arena in the past. They have been made to think that they can't learn, that they're not good students. So they do have a very poor self-esteem. And so if they allow themselves to care about this and they fail, then that can cause severe mental trauma, and they realize that. And in fact, that's I think some of the reasons that students many times are afraid to try the strategies, because if they're not trying, then they can say, well, if I tried, you know, I could do better. If I cared, I could do better. And that's kind of a psychological self-defense mechanism. But once they give up that mechanism, if they try and they care and they don't succeed, then that is horribly frightening to them. And so one of the things that I always do when I speak to students, I always start with before and after scores. And there are, you know, a lot of them that I give. In fact, so on the information that I'm going to give to Rachel to post, I'll post the presentation to the chemistry class that I do. And one of the very first slides is like 5 students, where one student had made a 42 on the first test, hundreds on everything after that. And when I looked at the results of the interview, many of the students said, I was really dejected after the first test, but when I saw the examples of other students, the improvement that they made after they used the strategies, then I was hopeful that that would work for me too. And so just seeing that is very motivational. And so, yeah, and also having the conversation with the student to let the student know that I believe in your ability to excel. And, you know, whatever's happened before, that was in the past, you didn't do well because you didn't have the strategies. But the strategies that I can share with you, and students, when I ask students, you know, have you ever used these things before? Typically they have not. So this is a whole new ball game, and I can get students to let go of the notion that because they weren't successful in the past means that they can't be successful in the future. So great question. Okay, and so the reading strategy that I taught, you know, in the Learning Center community, we'll be very familiar with these because this follows reading comprehension, but the previewing text before the reading while you're developing questions, and then checking your understanding of the reading as you go along by paraphrasing individual paragraphs and putting things together. That's exactly what I advised Travis to do, and those were his scores, and he did well in the course. And so just to summarize that, we may know it as SQ. You may teach SQ 3R, 4R, it's up to 5R. Now, in fact, it may even be up to 6R. Actually, put in the chat box, yes. You don't have to put no, but if you've seen an SQ 6R, because I have not seen an SQ 6R yet, but if you have, then just put yes, and but it's probably on the way. Okay, no 6. Okay, so Talia, I'm going to ask you to put in the question box. Well, no, you may not know right now where it came from, but yeah, I'll email you and find out where that is so that I can get with the program, and now it will be SQ6R. But SQ3R I find works well also, because most students have no reading strategies. 5R, you do that survey before you start to give your brain the big picture, then come up with questions that the reading is going to answer, and then read one paragraph at a time while stopping, paraphrasing that information, putting it in your own words. And then you can teach them how to annotate, write in the margins. And then the next R is for review. Once you get to the end of a section, you can stop and review that. And then the last R is for reflect. Are there any other views? Are there any remaining questions? Oh, and actually, Talia, if you see the other R, an R that's not here, then just put that in the question box for us, please. Okay, yeah, SQ3R is in the bookmark. Yeah, all of those are fine, because students really have no reading strategies at this point. And so, oh, reshape, interesting. Okay, got you. All right, so I will look that up. Yes. Okay, and I think the reshape probably is kind of related to the reflect, but that's, or reevaluate. Yes. So yeah, we could probably come up with maybe 10 R's. But when I show this to students, I will ask them, I'll say, does it look like if you have to do all that, it's going to take a long time to get through the reading? And they say, yeah. And I tell them that, you know, it sounds like it, but I've taught this strategy to a lot of students, and they love it. They absolutely love it. They'll come back to my office and they say, Dr. McGuire, that reading strategy was so helpful. I'm getting so much more out of my reading now. And I'll say, oh, that's fantastic. And I'll ask, are you finding that it's taking you longer to get through the reading using this than what you were doing before? And to a person, they say, well, no, actually, I finished the reading sooner doing it this way than what I was doing before. Now, you may not get this because I didn't set it up in the interest of time. I didn't set it up as completely as I do with students. But my question to you would be, why should it take less time for students to complete their reading doing all of this stuff than what they were doing before? Anybody have an idea? Okay, they're reading with purpose. That's what students say. Yeah, they now have a focus because they've come up with the questions. Yeah, if you preview well, you can read faster. Less rereading, yeah, keeps attention. Okay, absolutely. And so one of the things they say is, I don't have to go back and do all that rereading. And in the setup I do with students, we talk about the fact that if your brain doesn't have that big picture, you get in, you read a little bit, then your mind starts to wander and you have to reread. And so, yeah, you're right. With the old way, you read a little bit, then you have to go back. So it's read, go back, read, go back, read, go back, read, go back. But with the new way, you are moving more slowly through the information, but you get to the end point sooner because you're not doing all that back and forth. And students love this. Now, the other thing that I like to do is give students an example, a concrete example of the way this works. And so on the next slide, there's a little activity I'm going to do with you. I'm going to show a reading passage. I'm going to give you a minute or so to read it, and then I'm going to ask you a question about it after I take it off the screen. So let's read this. Okay, you may not have finished the whole thing, but I'm going to take it off. And so give me a yes or no in the question box. Do you think if I asked you to please unmute your mic and summarize the information in that passage to everyone who's participating in this. Would you be able to do that, do you think? Okay, I'm seeing lots of no's. I certainly would.
I can tell you I definitely wouldn't.
Okay, yeah, definitely not. Okay, but now let me ask this. If you had known before you started to read that it was about flying a kite, I want you to read it again and then just put in the chat box yes or no if it makes more sense to you now that you know what it's about. Okay, I'm saying some yes, some totally yes. And there's a different example in the book, but I want students to experience this so that they see that if they take the time to preview, it's going to make a big difference in their understanding, and they'll be able to do that. And that's the reference for that if you want to look it up, and the website link. And just last year, or I guess it was, is that 2021? My box is covering it up, and I can't move it to the side. I have it right here, so I can look at it. But I was doing a presentation to some college, well, it was a combination of college and high school students, not students, teachers, college and high school teachers. And I was teaching this reading strategy. And one of the high school instructors sent me an email. Okay, so yeah, what happened was during the it was April of this year. He decided when he heard this reading strategy, he thought it was so important that he took off his headset so his son, his 10th grade son, could hear it. And so this Monday, after that, the workshop was on a Saturday. He said, during your presentation, I disconnected my headset in order for my son to hear your suggestions on effective reading strategies. His son was currently attending a very selective high school. He had a GPA of 4.2, but 3 weeks ago, he'd gotten a 72 on his test for honors biology, and he was dejected. And so he had a test that was coming up Monday, and he was studying for it Sunday, and his dad told him to follow the strategy, the reading strategy, on the test that was coming up the next day. And the dad emailed me late that afternoon. I guess his son had gotten home from school and shared with him that he made an 86 on the test. He was so relieved and grateful for the advice. Thank you so much. And I kept in touch with the father, and the student continued to use, now the reader student have context for what they'll be learning. Yeah, and so they continue to do it. Now that's the other thing about this information. When students learn it, it gives them a whole different paradigm for how to think about school and learning and studying. And the folks who were interviewed said that they were going to continue to use the strategies, and they were already using them in classes other than chemistry. And so getting back to the faculty member who said that students have a lot of low self-esteem, many times their self-esteem is tied to their grade. So when he made a 72, he wasn't feeling very good about himself. But then when he made an 86, he was relieved, he was grateful. And so I do think that we have a way to impact students' self-esteem based on how we interpret their low scores. I find that when I tell students, I don't care if you made a 40 on the first test. I know you can make 90 or higher on the next test because your 40 had nothing to do with how smart you are. It had everything to do with the strategies you were using before, and you can start to do something different. And this was from a guy who was studying, he was trying to teach himself calculus and physics. And he already had a PhD in a social science. And you'll see this, I won't read the whole thing, but when you get it, you'll see it. But basically, he said that before he had this reading strategy, it was a struggle. But using this reading strategy, he said it's the ultimate divide and conquer approach to learning, and it was making the subjects way more interesting. And so if we can find a way to teach our students these these strategies, problem solving, reading, really, really important. Now, I said earlier that reflection questions are, I think, key to this development. And I have found that there are 2 reflection questions that are really, really likely to effect that paradigm shift. And the first one, I'm going to ask you to just put in the question box. What would you say is the difference between studying and learning? And I get 3 common responses from students, and I'm going to see if your responses are similar. This is right. The other thing is I tell students that there are no right or wrong answers to any of the reflection questions I ask. And that's important because they have to know that I'm not listening for right answers or wrong answers. I'm seeing what you're thinking, what your experience has been. Okay, goals to learning. Learning implies understanding what studying does not. Understanding short-term versus long-term. It would apply the material, reinforcement of learning. Learning is a way you change, okay, that you do. Okay, so you have some responses that are different from the students, but you also have responses that address the three things that students say. The most common response I get from students, so they say, and nobody's asked them this before, so they haven't thought about this, but they will think and they are very engaged, and they'll say, studying is just memorizing information for a test or a quiz. But learning is when I understand that information, I can apply it, I can relate it to what I already know. Sometimes they'll say, studying is short-term, learning is long-term. Sometimes they'll say, studying is tedious, learning is fun. And so some of you, I noticed, said that you gave answers that were kind of equivalent to, studying is the process, learning is the result. So learning is the goal, studying is what you do to get there. And so, but I never get that from students. And so sometimes I'll tell students what faculty say, and they laugh. And then I'll ask them, I said, yes, have any of you ever studied and the goal was not learning? And they all say yes. And so I'll ask you, what was the goal? And I ask students, well, what was the goal when you were studying? And put in the question box for me, what was the goal when they were studying? Because it wasn't to learn the information. So what was the goal? But yeah, just to get an A. Yep, get it done to pass the test. Absolutely. And so then I will ask them up to this point in time, have they been more in study mode or learn mode? And put in the chat box, what do you think most of them tell me? Once we establish this difference between studying and learning that they hadn't thought about before, and I asked up to this point what mode they've been in, yeah, they say study mode. Okay, and then for the next question, I give them two scenarios and ask for which one they would work harder. First scenario is, I said, I told you that you didn't do so well on the instruction. I say, look, you didn't do well at all on the first test, so you have to make an A on the next test that's coming up next week. You know how hard you would work for that. And when I give you the B scenario, I want you to tell me if you would work harder for A or B, and I want you to put that in the question box. So the second scenario is I come to you as the instructor and I say, look, the next test in this class is coming up next week, and I see now I'm going to have to do what everybody in the class kept asking me if I would do before the first test. Everybody kept saying, are you going to give us a review session? Can we have a review session? And I said, no, this is college. We don't do review sessions in college. That was high school. So I didn't offer a review session, but the class did horribly. The average was 65. So I see now that before this next test is coming up, I'm going to have to offer a review session. So I'm going to offer a review session, the class session before the test, and you are going to teach that review session. I'm going to have you come up to the front of the class, and you're going to explain all of the important concepts, paying particular attention to the more difficult concepts to make sure everybody is prepared for the test that's coming up the next day. Would you work harder for A or B? And I want you to put in the chat box, yes, not, oh, thank you, Christina. But you guys are the terrific ones. You guys are in the trenches. I'm just sitting in my study having fun with y'all, and you have to face all those students. Okay, yeah, you say B. And this is exactly what students say. They will say they have to study hard. They would study hard. And then I ask why. And so just put in the question box, why would you work harder if you had to teach the material? And there are 3 common answers I get from students, and I'll see if you are in sync with the student. Social pressure. Yeah, that's one of the ones they say. They'll say, well, I don't want to look stupid in front of the class. Yes, Julia, they say, because I'm responsible for everybody else. And that's the third one, Shannon. Yeah, the 3 are, well, I got to know everything if I have to teach it. And sometimes faculty laugh about that because they say, well, didn't they know they needed to know everything to make an A on the test? Well, no, they didn't, because that wasn't their experience. They made A's on tests because they got the test questions before and they memorized those answers. And then the embarrassment one, they say, I don't want to look stupid in front of the class. And then the third one is the more empathetic students will say, well, now everybody's grade in the class is dependent upon what I do. So I want to make sure I can explain things more than one way. I can use charts and diagrams. If somebody doesn't understand, I need to know it deeper than I'm teaching it, so I have some place to go. So they realized they would work harder if they had to teach it. And so I said, okay, great. And I said, now up to this point, have you been operating more in scenario A mode or scenario B mode? And put in the chat box what you think they say. Have they been more in A mode or B? Absolutely. Yeah, they've been in A mode. And then at this point, I tell them, great, great. I love it when you're doing everything wrong. Because if you're doing everything wrong, that means that when you start changing, doing what I'm suggesting, then you are very likely to see a huge increase. And I do that for two reasons. One is I never want students to feel bad about what they've been doing before, because it wasn't their fault that they've been doing before. They didn't know that they were supposed to do anything different. And so I don't want them to feel bad about that. And the second thing is I want them to know that when they change, the likelihood that they're going to see a huge improvement is very, very good. That's why I show the before and after scores, because that's what's going to motivate them to do something differently. And so those are really, really important reflection questions. And again, I like to show them examples. And I forgot to say at the beginning, I always like to ask faculty to do two things, or Learning Center folks to do two things I wish I had done at the beginning of my career, but I didn't. Everybody in this session has had students, you've worked with students who weren't doing well, they came and they talked to you, they started doing a lot better. But if you're like me, you never ask those students to send me an email and tell me exactly what you did differently. And I'm going to ask you to do that, and then keep the before and after scores, well, of course, the name's redacted. So when a student comes in dejected saying, oh, woe is me, I made a 65 on the first test, you know, I'm sunk. And you say, oh, don't worry about that. Here's a student who made a 42 on the first test, made hundreds on everything else. Here's a student who made nothing but 50s and 60s before the final exam and made 107 on the final exam. And so they know that you don't think that they're stupid because they failed the first test, and they know you're going to give them strategies that will help them do much better. So you're not worried about their 65, and they should not be either. But they are going to have to start back at the beginning of the course and learn the material the way that they need to learn it in order to do well. But that's very doable. And so this young man heard the discussion when I was talking to a chemistry class in mid-September. And he came up afterwards and he told me he had a betta fish. And this is his betta fish. I asked him to send me a picture in his room, and he was going to start teaching the information to his betta fish. And so I got an email from him the end of October. His bio had gone up from a 66 to a 98, his chem from 62 to 83, and 90 on the next bio. I didn't get the other chemistry grades, but he made a B in both courses. And this is the email that he sent to me. We have SI, supplemental instruction at LSU, and these are just peer-led team review. I don't want to call them review sessions. The SI folks would kill me if they heard me call them review sessions. They're really sessions where students learn effective learning strategies for the material in the course. The SI leader will review some of the information, but the goal is to teach students how to learn the information as opposed to just providing review sessions. And so before this student heard this information, he was going to SI sessions, but he wouldn't do anything. He wasn't doing anything to prepare for them. He would just go see what the SI leader was going to say. But now, before these sessions, he would try to answer as many of the questions as possible to see where he was in terms of grasping the information. And then when those sessions were over, he knew what he really needed to understand. I'm sorry, before they were over, when he went over the stuff before, when he got to the session, now he knew what he didn't understand and what he really needed to concentrate on. Then after the sessions, he would go back to his room and teach the materials to his betta fish. Anything he couldn't explain, he'd study more, and he just continued that process until he could explain everything in his notes. And we see the results. Now, I told the students, a group of students I was working with at Howard University about this story. And before I got on the plane to go back to Baton Rouge, one of the students had texted me this picture of the betta fish they had gone out to buy and say, look what you inspired. And so now I have to remember to tell students, no, you don't have to go out and buy a pet. You know, if you have empty chairs in your room, if you have stuffed animals, if you have imaginary friends, if you have a mirror, if you have anything that you can pretend that you're teaching the information to, it makes all the difference in the world, because you will get stuck when you don't totally understand, and that's your key to go back and study it more. Because without having that, our brains convince us that we totally understand stuff that we really don't. And we don't know that it doesn't unless we make it explain it, and then it will reveal that it doesn't know that, and then we have to go back and learn it. And so I thought about this beta fish, when I was doing a workshop in March. And so I emailed the young lady who sent me this, and I asked her, I didn't know if he was still living. They'd flushed him down the toilet. I didn't know what happened. So I emailed her to find out his fate, and he's still alive and well, and he's living with Michaela, one of the students in the program. Okay, coders use rubber ducks. Okay, thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, if you say it, you'll remember it. Yeah, it's partly that, but I think sometimes students use the if you say it, you'll remember it is when they're going through the information, they'll stop and they'll say it, and they'll think, okay, I'm going to remember it because I said it. And so it's definitely related to that, but it's more that once you finish studying a topic, then pretend that you're teaching that information without using any external sources, no textbook, no notes. And so you're absolutely right that, but they have to recognize that to say it is teaching it and anticipating questions while they're going through this exercise and not looking at anything and not just saying it every time they've read it. But great point, Mary. Okay, now you've heard me say a bunch of times, I tell students, I don't care if you made a 2 on the first test, you can do significantly better on the next test because it's all about the strategy. So I need to give students an exercise that demonstrates that. Now there's a different exercise than in the book than the one we're going to do now. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, on the next slide after this one, not this one, on the next slide after this one, you're going to see a bunch of numbers all jumbled up all over the screen. And I want you to first, I'm going to give you 15 seconds to first locate the number 1. Then I want you to locate the number 2, then the number 3, etc., etc. And so when I tell you 15 seconds are up, I want you to put in the question box. I'm going to test this out. I've never set this up like this before, but I'm going to test this out and see if it works. Okay, since you're finding the numbers in sequence, when I take them off the screen, 15 seconds will be up. I want you to put in the chat box, listen very carefully, put in the chat box the highest number you got to finding them in sequential order. Now, I'm not asking for the biggest number you see on the screen because that's going to be an 80. I want to know the biggest number you got to when you were finding them in sequential order. So that's what we're going to do. So let's start finding the numbers now. Okay, so put in the chat box and the question box. Okay, 7, 11. Okay, 8, 5. Oh, it worked. Okay, 10. Yeah. Oh no, there's an 80. Okay. And so yeah, and then there's a 76. Now I don't think you found that many find them in sequence, but maybe so. Maybe you've seen it before. But typically, if you find them in sequence, then people get to, and I see somebody got to 1, yeah, because if you had a lot of trouble locating that 1, then you wouldn't have found any more than that. But typically I will get single digits or low double digits. And so that's what we did. Okay, so now what I want you to do is see that same grid of numbers, but with a vertical line placed there and a horizontal line placed there and the position of the number 1. And so now please put in the chat box for me, what do you notice about the positioning of the other numbers? How are they positioned? Because they're positioned according to something. What do you see that they are positioned according to? Exactly. Okay, in a quadrant clockwise, absolutely. And those are the 2 things students say. Now, most students these days, they don't know what an analog clock looks like. So they'll typically say quadrants, but most faculty will say clockwise. Yeah. So the 1 is here, the 2 is there, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, the 7, the 8, etc., etc. So now I'm going to give you 15 seconds to find as many numbers as you can find. And this time put in the question box how many you've gotten to. So let's start finding the numbers now. and stop. Okay, so put in the chat box the number you saw. Okay, 18, 17, 22, 13, 21. Yes. Okay, so we did significantly better. And it sounds like, it looks like a lot of us got.
I made it to 17.
Okay, and what did you do the first time, Rachel?
I just was like,
Less than 8?
I don't know how high I got, but.
Was it less than 8?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so 50% more, okay? And so, and that's what many people have. And in the exercise that's in the book, then there's even a bigger increase in the before and after. But most people will double the score. And then I'll say, yeah, so that's proof positive that you could have made a 50 on the first test and 100 on the next test. And so the reason is because there was a major difference. What was the major difference between the first attempt and the second attempt? You can put that in the question box for me. Okay, what are we doing the first time around? Yeah, we had context, we had a strategy, the methodology, we had a pattern, absolutely. The organization, we knew the underlying organization, so absolutely. And so that's what I tell students is important, and that's so important to your courses. You've got to know the big picture, how the information is organized. And so that makes a big difference. Now, actually, I'm curious because I see Mary Lou says, I don't know, I was lost. Mary Lou, do you want to unmute your mic? And, oh, actually, let me ask, in webinar, in GoToWebinar, do they have that option?
I would have to unmute her. So I can send her a request to unmute herself. And if she has she might not have a
that's right.
a microphone, but I will give her that option if she would like it.
Right, because I'm not sure, Mary Lou, if, and it might be Mary Louise, but I only see Mary Lou. If you're saying that you didn't, oh, go ahead.
I did not understand the number sequence.
I see. Now, the first time, did you do better the second time?
No.
No, okay.
Worse.
So, yeah, no, and that's good information to have, because what that says is that the instructions were not clear enough for everybody to get them. Because if I had explained it clearly enough, then you would have known what we were talking about. And that happens to students sometimes, where they could certainly do the task, but the information has not been explained in a way that makes it clear to them. So
exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. Okay, pull up the first chart and think about aloud as you try to do it. Absolutely. Yes. That's a great strategy, Darcy. Okay, and so I use this strategy to show students that the performance that they exhibit is really not about how smart they are, because we didn't get any smarter in the 1 minute that elapsed between when we did it the first time and the second time, and we got twice as much. We didn't get any smarter, but we knew what the underlying structure was. And so when I learned that it was this easy to get students to significantly increase their performance, I started reading everything I got my hands on, and I learned a lot about learning. We know a lot about learning now that we didn't, even 40 years ago. We know active learning is more lasting than passive learning. We know that thinking about thinking is very important. Teaching students the term metacognition is really important. And the level at which learning occurs is important. And in order for students to understand this, I explained Bloom's taxonomy to them, going from just straight memorization to now you can explain things in your own words, to now you can work problems and answer questions you've never seen before by applying the information that you understand. If you're here, you could take any concept, break it into simpler concepts and see how they all fit together. If you're evaluating, you could look at any two theories, any two concepts, and determine whether one is more likely to be correct than another. And if you're creating, now you can come up with your own ideas, your own theories, your own ways of doing things. Okay, I'm seeing a question. Is it okay with you if I try these same? Oh, thank you for asking that. Absolutely. None of this stuff is copyrighted. And so you can use, one of the reasons you're going to get this information, you're going to get it in PowerPoint form. I'm not going to send you a PDF. You'll get the PowerPoint slides. So you can pick and choose any of these slides that you want to use with your students. And if you have the ability, if your bookstore would just carry Teach Yourself How to Learn, or if you could even put that on the syllabus maybe as recommended, then it goes into a lot more detail and it helps students really connect to the information like we're connecting to it here. But yes, you can use any of the information that we're talking about in slide form. Oh, okay, no problem. And this is just another form of Bloom's taxonomy. And I discovered the utility of Bloom's taxonomy because I never taught it before I got to LSU. I learned it as a graduate student because my PhD is in chemical education, but I never taught it. But when we teach students Bloom's taxonomy, they get it. The number one reaction I get from students when they see this, they'll say, wow, why didn't anybody teach me this before? And so when I show students Bloom's, I ask them to, oh, is this a poll question, Rachel, I think?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
you're
yeah,
right.
okay,
One
yeah.
second.
Okay. So what I
right.
want to know is when I teach Bloom's to students, and I'll ask them to think back to high school and tell me what was the highest level they typically had to operate when they were in high school. If they could get away with just memorizing information, that would be 1. If they had to explain everything in their own terms, that would be 2. If they had to routinely answer questions with problems they'd never seen before, that was 3, so forth and so on. Indicate what level you think students tell me.
Okay, we're getting some responses, about 40% so far.
Okay, yeah. You know, actually, and Rachel, I'm finally getting it since I've never used this platform before. Every time you say something like that, I'm thinking that you're telling me, but I'm realizing you're telling the audience because they can't see it.
Right, right. Well, I'm telling you too, but you know, it's for anybody.
Okay.
All right, we're at about 60%. Oh,
Okay. Oh, Diana Garland, hi. Yeah, we're buddies from NCLCA, and you use the book in tutor training. Okay, it's very helpful. Yeah, because the tutors themselves, I've done a lot of tutor training, and they're not using these things either. So thanks so much, Diana. Okay, yeah, and you're right. You can go ahead and we can shut it down, and you can show it now because it's totally consistent with faculty learning center folks around the country.
okay.
So we'll go ahead and show the results. And as you're going to see,
There we go.
Okay, yeah, most of them 1s and 2s. And then because, as you heard, I do this after students have taken at least one exam in college, and I'll say, okay, now that you've been in college for a while and you see what we do here, and this is the next poll question, what is the lowest level you think you have to operate in college in order to make the A's, not A's and B's now, but the A's that you are totally capable of making when you master the material? What's the lowest level you think you're going to have to operate here? And what do you think students tell me? What level do you think they say?
Is that the next poll?
Yes.
Okay, let me go ahead and
okay, and I see a question here. Are the results different for students who took? They are not, actually. And the surprising thing to me is they're not different. Typically, when I talk with tutors, most of the tutors say that they were operating at 1 and 2 because, and now the question though, I say, I'm not asking you what level you actually operated at. I'm asking you the highest level you needed to operate to make A's and B's in your classes. And so some of our tutors are operating at higher levels, but they are acknowledging that if they had only just memorized information or understood it, then they still would have made A's and B's. But I do lots of workshops for graduate students, for med school students, dental school students, law school students, divinity school students, and most of them say at the lower level they were operating at for graduate students, they'll typically say applying. And yeah, okay, and so we can share, let's say we're at about 62%, but that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
We'll share the results now.
All right.
Okay, and what you're gonna see is that, okay, for about half of us said applying, 24 analyzing, 11 evaluating. And so you are going to be very pleasantly surprised to see what students say. Now, the high school is pretty much what you said. 1s and 2s, pretty much the highest bump. But in college, students will go to, they'll see that it's got to go higher levels. Not every time I've done this, hasn't been this big a bump at 6, but typically the big bump is at 5 or 6. And for this year, you see that it was very high also. And so, I'm sorry, this was high school where the big bump was at 1, and in college here, the big bump was at evaluate. And so students get it that they have to be much higher. Now, occasionally I will be at an institution, and for the college students, I'll see a lot of maybe 3s and 4s. And so then I'll stop and I say, okay, see what you're saying. And I said, but how many of you are in courses where at the end of the semester, you have to either do a term paper, a research paper, or a project? And of course, all the hands go up. And then I'll ask, what level is that? So put in the question box for me, please. What level is it if they've got to do research papers, if they've got to do projects? What level would you say they have to operate at in order to, okay, yeah, absolutely, at least creating 6. And this is what students say. Then they'll tell me 6. And I say, yeah, because the difference between an outstanding project or presentation is the level of creativity that goes into it. And so, because I want to get those people who think that it's great to be at 3, I need them to understand that they need to be higher than that. And so then the tool that we use to teach them how to get higher, we just call it the study cycle. And 5-step process: preview information before you go to class, and then I'm sorry, preview. That was a bit review. Yeah, preview before you go to class. Then you got to go to class, actively participate, take notes. Then as soon after class as possible, review what just happened in class. And it only takes about 5-10 minutes to do the preview review part. So you got to do more than that. And so we call those focused study sessions. And we show them how to organize their study time. If you set aside about 45, 50, 60 minutes, take a minute or two to plan what you're going to study, then study with focus and action, then take a break, then come back and review, and then decide if you're going to do another one or you're going to change tasks. Then the last step is to do that check. Have I mastered this information enough so that I could teach it? And occasionally I would forget, and I want to remember now to say that when a lot of our students now have ADHD, and we did a focus group, our evaluation folks at LSU did a focus group, and they asked students, are you using the study cycle? And some of the students said, well, no, I have ADHD, so I can't study for 45, 50 minutes. And then when I saw that, I realized that I was forgetting to tell students, if you only have 10 minutes, you can take a minute to preview, take a minute to plan, study for 8 minutes. You don't need to take a break if it's only 10 minutes, but study for 8 minutes and then do a quick review. You have to do more of them if you do shorter periods of time, but you can do this kind of thing no matter how much time you have. And students love, love, love this because it's the first time anybody has ever given them a study method. Because, and put a yes or no in the question box for me. Have you ever had a student say, well, I just really don't know how to study. I don't know how to study. Okay, yeah, all the time. And typically they'll give us reasons. What are some of the reasons why don't they know how to study? They say, I don't really know how to study because, and I've heard typically 2 different reasons. Exactly, I didn't have to. Okay, I was too busy. Okay, never had to. And the other thing I hear is nobody ever taught me. And so they love this. Oh, there it is. Yeah, everything says nobody taught me. Yeah, so they love this. And this is an example of a student who said that the focus study, she's now in a PhD program. She's a PhD candidate now. She has now a couple of publications, but she said that those focus study sessions helped her most. She got A+ on 3 out of 4 of her finals. And this was, she sent me this was the final semester of her senior year. And she said it was great. It's important that students use it before finals week, but it really benefits students during finals week because it's kind of a time management tool also. And okay, neurodivergent students, let's see. Can you read that comment, Rachel, because I can't see it from the beginning.
Sure. She says in parentheses, I have ADHD. Students with ADHD and other neurodivergent students also hear negative evaluations of their skills a lot. You don't have the ability to study, etc.
And that's a great point. And so I think thank you so much, Presley. In the interest of building up our students' confidence in themselves and their self-esteem, I like to show neurodivergent students how their divergence is a strength as opposed to a weakness. And in fact, there's a book, it's called The Gift of Dyslexia. And say that the break was most helpful. Yeah, they go hours on end. Yeah, so they find a lot of useful things in this study cycle. So I really encourage you to show this. Now, this was a faculty member, North Dakota engineering professor, and she had a student who was struggling in his classes, and all she did was share the PowerPoint and emphasize just 2 slides, Bloom's taxonomy and the study cycle. And then shortly thereafter, he sent her a note and said, the email September 7th, this was on August 20 something. I can't see exactly the date, it's behind my chat thing. But he was applying himself, changed his study and planning habits, and scored 114% on the first and only graded assignment, took the first exam, got 100%. And she said that she used that strategy and decided, the idea that if students teach something, then they're going to know it better. So she invited students to co-teach some of the lectures with her. They did a great job. She saw how they poured their passion into the experience, and she said it was a great experience for her. And so, we can use this to our benefit. Metacognitive strategies that we taught at the CAS really closed the it went a long ways for closing that equity gap. The GPA change if they had 3 or more, if they went to 3 or more Center for Academic Success services compared to the students who went to no services, plus 0.14, et cetera, et cetera. For all incoming students who had a less than 2.0 first semester GPA, the change from their first semester GPA to the second semester GPA was almost a half a point. So if a student had a 2.1, then, well, let's say 1.7, it would have been more like a 2.3, got them off of probation. But if they went to none of the services, then it was less than a 0.1 change. And so this really is helpful. And I see we're coming to a close. So I'll just share with you, when we teach these strategies to a whole class, we taught this to a chemistry class. The students who were there that day and the ones who didn't show up had about the same average on the first test. But there was a letter grade difference at the end of the course because on exam 2, these folks went up to 77. They went down to 69. And we published this work in the Journal of Chemical Education. And then in the second semester course, there was a 2-letter grade difference. And you see that the big difference was in the homework total. And it was reinforced by when I read what those students said in the interview. They said that after the presentation, they started using homework as a learning tool. And this showed in this group. And then in this semester, I gave the presentation after the first 3 exams. And here the folks who attended had a lower average in the course than the people who were absent. And I can tell you, I wasn't sure that this would make a big difference, after 3 exams. But you see on exam 4, these folks went up to 83.45. They went up, but just to about 76. The final exam average, though, was 81 versus 75. And final course 85 versus 79, B versus C. So it makes a huge, huge difference in just that 50-minute presentation. University of Rhode Island did it university-wide. I won't go through all of these because you'll have it, but this was a partnership between the Faculty Development Center and the Student Learning Center. And they did what they call a university-wide ACE Your Course Challenge. And these are the results that they found, that the final course grades for the students who didn't go to either the one workshop or the follow-up that they did, where they sent an email once a week for about 6 weeks to students asking them, what strategy are you going to apply this week? If the students didn't do the one workshop or the follow-up activities, then their average was C+. The students who only went to the workshop, their average was, and Rachel, is that a B or B minus? Because I can't see it.
Where?
Your workshop session. Oh, it's a B. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Is the question box going? Okay, B. I couldn't tell if there was a minus after that.
Oh, no, I don't see any minus. Yep.
Okay, but if they attended the workshop and completed the challenge, then it was a B+. And the difference between getting a C versus getting a B+ in a chemistry course for a student who's pre-med, and most of the students are, makes a huge, huge difference. And they actually got an award for doing this. And so as we come to close out, the last major concept that I want to talk about is mindset. And that's the work of Carol Dweck and her colleagues at Stanford. So put in the chat box for me, yes or no, if you're familiar with Carol Dweck's work on mindset. I suspect, yeah, that most of us would be. Okay, and so, okay, somewhat, yeah. And so basically, she and her group, well, they wrote Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. And then David Shank wrote The Genius in All of Us, Why Everything You've Been Told About Genetics, Talent, and IQ is Wrong. And what Dweck and her group found that most people have one of two mindsets about intelligence. They think either you're born with a certain amount of it that's not going to change very much over your lifetime. She calls that a fixed mindset. The other view is that you can grow your intelligence with your actions. You can do things that will make yourself smarter. And we now know from studies in neuroplasticity that the growth mindset is much closer to the truth, that you can grow your intelligence. And so I guess to make an analogy, this would be like if you have a fixed mindset, then you consider if someone gave you an IQ test in 3rd grade and your IQ was 90, when you got to 10th grade, it's not going to be very much different than that because your IQ is your IQ. It's fixed, relatively fixed at birth. But the growth mindset says, I could be tested in 3rd grade and have an IQ of 90. But then when I get to 10th grade, if I've learned how to do the things that are tested on an IQ test, I can have an IQ of 120. And so that's the growth mindset. And again, we know that growth mindset is much, much more close to the truth. And the reason that's so important is because your responses to a lot of situations are based on your mindset. People with a fixed mindset tend to avoid challenges. They give up very easily when they get to obstacles. They think effort is fruitless because either they're smart enough to do it without working or they're not smart enough to do it at all. They ignore constructive criticism and they find the success of others very threatening. It's almost like they think there's only a certain amount of success out there. The more you have, the less there is for me. But people with a growth mindset embrace challenges. They persist through obstacles because they know that the effort that they put in, that's the path to mastery. They learn from constructive criticism and they're inspired by the success of others. And this is just a little diagram that shows that if you have a fixed mindset and react to these things the way people with fixed mindsets do, then you're going to plateau early and never reach your full potential. Whereas if you have a growth mindset, then you continue to develop by your reaction to each of these, and you reach higher and higher levels of achievement. And these folks over here have kind of a deterministic view of the world. We used to call it internal versus external locus of control. These are the people who tend to think that I'm not really in control. I was, given a certain amount of intelligence, and it's not my fault if I'm not doing well. And so they don't think that they're responsible for their results. But these people know that if I put in the work, then I'm going to see results. And so here's the next poll question. I want you to tell me, when we see what this difference in mindset is, what mindset about intelligence do you think most of our students have? And I'll give you a little while to answer that. And I find that this is really, really crucial. Okay, so we're at about 58. So at 60, we'll give you the 5-second warning. It's at 60, so it's 5 seconds. Okay, so Rachel, let's close the poll. Okay, yeah, and you can show it. Yeah, so about 80% fixed and about 20% growth, 78-22. And this is exactly what students say. I ask these questions to students and they say the same thing. So let's put the next poll up, Rachel. And then as she's putting that poll up, and this next poll has to do with what mindset about student intelligence do you think most faculty have? And as you're answering that, I will tell you that the reason that so many students have a fixed mindset is we socialize students into a fixed mindset. We tell students, oh, you're so smart. I can't tell you the number of parents I've encountered. And they'll say, oh, Julie is really, really smart. She never has to pick up a book. But Johnny, he's not so bright. He has to study all the time. So not only do we socialize kids into thinking that intelligence is fixed, we also socialize them to think that if you have to study, that means you're not smart. And so that's the other thing that we have to change with students. Okay, so we're going to give you 5 more seconds, and then we will close the poll. I'm fascinated by your results. This is interesting. Okay, so we can close it now and show the results, Rachel. Yeah, I'm fascinated, but it makes perfect sense to me now that I think about it. When I do this with faculty, typically faculty say growth. It's the opposite. They'll say, 65, 70, 80% growth, maybe 20% fixed. And you're saying more fixed. And I got to remind myself, this is the Learning Center community. We've seen those faculty members who say, I only want the smart students to work in my laboratory. Yeah, is that a hand that's raised or? No, okay, maybe the image just showed up.
No,
okay.
I don't see anybody with a raised hand.
Okay, got you. And so, yes, and in fact, and I totally understand that because I didn't advance the slide, so that's what we were answering this time. I had a fixed mindset. Before I learned this, and now it goes back to about 20 years ago when I got to LSU, I didn't think that anybody who flunked my first 2 tests in organic chemistry and thought that they were going to be a doctor, they come to my office wanting to know, what can I do to improve? And I'm so sorry I did this. I repent of this. But I would say, because they said, well, what can I do? Because I want to be a neurosurgeon. What can I do to improve in your class? And I would say, well, let's talk about your backup plan. What's your backup plan? Because I just didn't think that there was any kind of way that they would be successful, because I didn't know this stuff. And now that I know it, in fact, I've emailed some of those students and apologized because they didn't follow the backup plan and they did become physicians. This is a student who emailed me April 6th, and he obviously had a fixed mindset. He said, I'm not good at chemistry. My grade is reflecting exactly that. He wanted me to tutor him. I spent not 1 nanosecond tutoring this guy. I spent 1 hour teaching him what we just went over. And these were his scores before, these were his scores after. He started making side notes in each chapter. And he said once he started using the book, I'd say that in chemistry, everything builds from the previous topic. And using, let me do this. There's a study that links faculty attitudes on intelligence to student success with a large impact on minority student success. And what these folks found was that all students in the classroom of a professor with a growth mindset did better, but the gap between the students who were not minoritized and the students who were minoritized, that gap was cut in half from 0.19 to 0.10. So it's really important that we have a growth mindset. We foster a growth mindset in our students, and we help faculty to adopt a growth mindset. And this is an interview that I did, an excerpt from an interview I did with a Princeton University student. She just graduated this past spring, and they used my book, Teach Yourself How to Learn. There was a group of students who were led by a chemistry professor, and they read the book, and she was telling me that students did really well. They loved it, and there were a lot of students who really, really made such a difference. And I asked her if she could send me a couple of names because I wanted to interview those students. And this young lady was from a public high school, and she struggled initially. And she told me that she and her friends from public high school had decided that it was the students from the private high schools, the elite private high schools, who were going to get the A's at Princeton. And because they had come from public high schools with less advantage, then they were relegated to the B's and C's of the world. But she said the growth mindset chapter in the book was, she said, so important, because before that, she thought if you're smart, you're smart. If you came from a private high school, you're all set. From a public high school, you can't even grow. But now she knows that you have challenges to overcome, but you can do better. And she told me about in her first neuroscience class, she went as a neuroscience major, and she wanted to major in neuroscience, but she was making a C in her first class. And she went to the professor's office, and the professor said, well, I don't even know why you're trying to major in neuroscience. You're getting a C in this class, freshman year. And so she said she went home and she cried the rest of the night. And she really looked at other things that she might be able to do, but she decided, no, she really only wanted to do neuroscience. And so she read the book and doubled down that she was going to use the strategy. She adopted the growth mindset, and she made all A's in her all neuroscience classes. The last semester, she got an A+ in her on her senior thesis. She said, if it wasn't for the growth mindset, I wouldn't even be here now, because she thinks that she would have probably flunked out. I now know that just because you're from a public high school doesn't mean you can't thrive at Princeton. And so I go back to the faculty member who said, what do you do about those students who just don't seem motivated, don't seem to have a lot of high self-esteem? And again, I think that we can give them the motivation. I didn't do this workshop now, but I do a workshop on motivational strategies, how to motivate students using strategies. And I think that that is a lot more in our control than we may realize. And so developing more, making learning centers more inclusive, I think we have to develop more inclusive recruiting and hiring. Typically, what we used to do was we would ask faculty for recommendations. We, put out the application, on the web. We thought we were publicizing it widely, but we got very few applicants from students of color until we started going to the African American Cultural Center, to the Black fraternities and sororities, who have excellent students, but they don't necessarily see themselves as tutors. So I think that we have to make that wider. I think we can provide spaces maybe in our centers, if we have them, for students of color, first generation students, etc., so that they can talk about issues affecting them. They can talk about when they went to a professor's office, and before they said anything, the professor said, I'm not here to do your homework for you. This happened to the young lady in chemistry who actually graduated with the highest average of all chemistry majors the year she graduated. But before the first test, and people saw that she made the highest score on the first test, their attitude was, I know you're not good, you're just here for me to tell you the answers, and I'm not going to do that. And these are what we call them microaggressions. And these microaggressions can really negatively impact students' ability to excel, because it takes up so much cognitive space. And it's debilitating. I mean, I live this. This is my life. I go to American Chemical Society meetings, and I know that people think that when I stand up to speak, I'm not going to say anything that means anything. I only got my PhD because of affirmative action programs, and it's just crazy. So if we could have a space for students to discuss that, then it makes a big difference. If we could meet regularly with our student staff of color and discuss some of the things that they're going through, some of the microaggressions that they're getting from students, like, I don't think you know this. And this happens, and I think just having a discussion with them so that they can get those things out and know that you understand, you are gonna, help them through that. I think that makes a big difference. When I was at Cornell University, there was a Nobel Prize laureate. In fact, we published together. But when he was out of town, he would ask me to sub for him. And it was in a huge lecture class, 400 people. There was a balcony area. And one of the African-American male students, he would always sit up there. And after one lecture, he came and he talked to me, and he said, Dr. McGuire, when students saw you standing in front of the class, one guy said, what does she think she's going to be able to teach us about chemistry? And this is just an attitude that's out there. And so helping your students through that is important. Set expectations for behavior and hold student staff and clients accountable, so they know that there's not going to be any negative talk, any disrespect of students who have learning disabilities, first gen, anything like that. And they know that everybody is able to excel. And then we got to train our our tutors to teach the basic skills, like the importance of the textbook, the syllabus, all that kind of stuff. And oh yeah, so in the last couple of minutes, this is actually from this semester. I am so frustrated with faculty who tell students that the textbook is not required. And I won't go into detail, it's in the book. But this is from this semester. I was helping a young man with calculus. He didn't even know there was a book for the course. Like the guy in chemistry you saw that had the fixed mindset, he told me there wasn't a book for the course. And I looked at the syllabus and there was a book, but it was just recommended. Okay, so this guy told me there's no book for the course. And I went online and I found the syllabus and it said recommended text, but not required. And I went on and I looked at the rate my professor thing from this class. And more than half the students, the question that said, was there a textbook for this course? More than half the students said no. And so we gotta help students recognize that the textbook is helpful. When he found the textbook, he said that it was really invaluable. This is another one, and class notes and binder. Now he says what the textbook is, but okay, I get it now. Textbook is a required class notes. And so, and then he says here, what will be on the exam? You're responsible for all the material in the class notes. So they don't buy the book. And yeah, okay, so last poll question. For which of those courses would you have bought the textbook when you looked at that syllabus? Both calculus but not chemistry, chemistry but not calculus, or neither? And we don't have to take the time to get up the last poll. You can just put in the question box A, B, C, or D.
Are you sure? I have it up.
Oh, it's up. Okay, so we can do it.
Yeah, let me launch it right now. There we go.
Okay. Okay, 5 more seconds. Okay, we'll take it off.
Yeah, and Pepper, I saw you said poll doesn't have both. You could select more than one. That's why we didn't put both.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah. And there we go.
Okay, so we'll show the results.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, and I have to do, yeah, okay, so I said, yeah, okay, calculus, not chemistry, chemistry, not calculus, and almost half of us said neither. And we're not even students. We know what we know. Most students will not buy it if they see that it's not mandatory. And so we have to help our students, help our tutors, help our students to recognize that the book is helpful. Now, this is a little activity that I'm not going to go over it now, so I'm just going to go through these really, really fast because you'll see it, and you can go through it when you have the PowerPoint. But it is a powerful demonstration that textbooks matter and are important. And this is that guy, because I was going to say he didn't have the textbook here, and then he bought the textbook and was using it, making side notes in each chapter. So as I close, I want to show you finally the results. This was a graduate student who was not passing his cumulative exams. But now let me go back and say, because I said I was going to say something about the how, why, and what if. And I thought I had a slide, but I didn't. When I asked the question about the difference between studying and learning, one young man who was a medical school student, he was dental school student, he said, the difference for me is this. He said, studying is focusing on the whats, but learning is focusing on the whys, the hows, and the what ifs. And I find that if I focus on the whats and forget the whats, I can't recreate them. But if I focus on the whys, the hows, and the what ifs, even if I forget the whats, I can recreate them. And so finally, and it seems I'm going to go maybe a minute over two. I apologize for that, but I was just having so much fun talking with everybody. Okay, so this poor guy only passed one cum exam. We give 8 a year. They have to pass 6 in the first 2 years. Only passed 1 his first year. And then he started working with the CAS and the Writing Center, learning these strategies in October of the next year. So now he's got to pass 5 out of 8 the second year, since he only passed 1 out of 8 the first year. Nobody thought he could do it, except me, I think. And sure enough, he did not pass 5 out of 8 the second year. He passed 5 out of 7. And he passed the December exam with the highest score in the group. And this is Dr. Algernon Kelly. Take a good look at this guy. He's the only person I know on the planet who has a PhD in chemistry. His is in analytical chemistry, and he started every single college course at the developmental level. Developmental reading, developmental writing, developmental math. And he learned these strategies, and now he teaches them everywhere he goes. And this last 3 emails I'd like to end on. October 17th, the student writes him, I'm struggling at Xavier. I really want to succeed, but everything is just ending with a decent grade. So he was getting C's. He was pre-med. I was hoping you could mentor me and guide me down the path that will help me realize my potential while here at Xavier. 1 week later, hey, Dr. Kelly, made 84 on my chem exam compared to 56 on my first one using your method for 2 days without even prior intense studying. We used to call them intense studying back in those days. November 3rd, hey, Dr. Kelly, increased my bio exam from 76 to 91.5 using your system. Ever since I started your study cycle program, my grades have significantly improved. I've honestly gained a sense of hope and confidence in Xavier. And this is what we want our students to have, hope and confidence. And he says, my family and I are really grateful that you've taken the time to get me back on track. If we have first generation students, they bring the hopes and dreams of their families with them to college. And they don't know how to fix it when things go off the rails. Their families don't, but this information will. And so implementation, what 1 or 2 strategies did you find most interested and doable that you're willing to try? And what research project could you design that tests the efficacy of any of the strategies? And you might be able to partner with your faculty development center like the folks in Rhode Island did. So in conclusion, we really can close that metacognitive equity gap, but we got to teach students how to learn. We've got to make the learning visible. We can't judge their potential on their initial performance, and we can't let them do it either. We've got to encourage them to persist even when they fail initially. We've got to encourage them to use metacognitive strategies for deep and integrative learning. These are some references. These are some acknowledgments. This is that faculty resource. This is the book for students. Thank you very, very much. And I will now stop the share, except I've never done this go to webinar, so I don't even know how to stop the share.
Let me see.
Oh, thank you, Rebecca. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I love talking to Learning Center colleagues because, and I can tell you this quick story. And when I was at Cornell, I was director of the Learning Center. Had no idea about any of this stuff. Didn't even think I needed to know it because I taught chemistry. And in fact, I was wondering, why do we even have to teach this stuff to people at Cornell? They should already know this. And so I apologized to my the associate director who taught this stuff. And I put that whole story in the book. But yeah, I have so much respect for colleagues in the Learning Center community because you knew this stuff way before I did. And I'm kind of now like a reformed alcoholic. You know, this is the answer. We can do this. So I will shut up now and turn it back over to Rachel because I've already kept you over 2 minutes.
All right, so I'm just gonna, I just went ahead and showed our final slide. So like I said at the beginning, when you exit the webinar, you'll be, hopefully, if all goes well, you'll be forwarded to a survey. So we appreciate if you could take that. Again, we are going to send out the recording of this webinar in a few days. We got to just make it, you know, make sure it's all pretty and ready for you. The slides we can send out right away. Dr. McGuire, if you'd like, I can go ahead and just send those to all the registrants.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And
so
I'll take the time right now to send you the other couple of things that.
All right. Yep, so I will do that. I will do that today. We really appreciate you all being here today. If you do have any questions you'd like to pass on to Dr. McGuire, you can do that, and you can send those to me. Or if you, Dr. McGuire, what's your email address if anybody wants to get in touch with you? Or?
It's S as in Sam, MCGUI, and the number 1 at lsu.edu.
Okay. S as in Sam, MCGUI, 1 at lsu.edu. Okay, so I'm putting that in the chat to everybody, so that should come up as like an announcement. So if you want to get in touch with her directly, or you can get in touch with me, Rachel C at Engineerica.com.
Wonderful, and thanks so much, Anne. And I can't see the of coming to Hawaii, I would love to do that. So wrangle me an invitation. No, but again, I want to thank everybody for participating, because again, I just have so much respect and admiration for you, because you're doing the hard work in the trenches, and I love being a part of this community, and I wish all of you a wonderful end of the semester and a very happy holiday season. So,
Thank you so
bye.
much, Dr. McGuire. It's been so great. Thank you, everybody, for coming. You have a great rest of your day.